We're meeting constantly on a monthly basis. And sometimes we joke around how we should probably start carpooling together because we're sometimes in some of the same places all the time.
They are elected officials riding in cars, and they are part of this month's governing cover story, celebrating the people who make government work. We are putting the best of public service in context.
TFIC takes you deeper into the stories that are shaping the future of state and local government.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
You're not Buzz Lightyear.
I'm Siri.
And I'm Google.
And I am Alexa.
Alexa seems so smart, I think we'd have a lot to talk about.
Pew, pew.
From governing and government technology, this is The Future in Context. With Paul Taylor, I'm Ashley Silver. We are beginning a month-long series about the people who make government work. Governing Magazine has selected a half dozen elected and appointed officials who exemplified the best in public service. The recognition marks the return of the Public Officials of the Year. We begin with the profile on Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley. Governing Editor Alan Greenblatt joined Paul from a windy beach to talk about Crowley, his breakthroughs in Milwaukee County, and all things POY.
Alan Greenblatt, welcome back to the big show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Paul. How are you?
Just fine. Hey, just for the listeners' benefit, there's a little bit of background sound. Where do we find you today?
So I'm at the Big Bass Grill in beside Lake Panasoffkee in Central Florida, Sumter County, Florida, famous as the home of the Villages, the huge retirement community. So I'm on the road, so this is a mobile stop.
Very good. And do you get hardship pay for such an environment?
Yeah, I feel like I should. I'm definitely putting in for it.
Listen, the last time we had you on the podcast, it was the beginning of a renaissance at governing with the reintroduction of the print magazine. On that same theme, this time we reintroduced Public Officials of the Year. For those that have never known, those that have never forgotten, and those that didn't know that they had a reason to care until now, can you give us a sense of its history, its scope, and its purpose?
Yeah, Public Officials of the Year is a 30-year-old project at this point. 1994 was governing's inaugural class, and it was an annual tradition. And it was ended when we shut down the print magazine temporarily, as it turned out, back in 2019. So the idea is to recognize people doing great work in state and local government, governors, mayors, state legislators, county executives, and line workers as well. People in tech or in housing inspection or whatever it might be who've done something outstanding. Because as journalists, of course, we tend to look for conflict, we tend to look for scandal and problems. But governing has always been a practitioner's magazine, and we're also looking for solutions. So the people we choose to profile in the series have been exemplars who've done outstanding things. And, it was always a point of pride in a way that how much they bragged about it after winning our award. But anyway, so we've brought it back, and we have a class of 6 winners. And I'm very happy that we're going to be featuring almost all of them on this podcast.
Yes, indeed. In fact, to coincide with the cover story in the magazine, we will dedicate the month of October to POY awardees, talking to all the staff writers about their profiles. Among the profiles you did is Milwaukee County Executive Dave Crowley. Give me a sense of him and how being a Milwaukee kid gave him certain advantages in becoming its county executive.
Yeah, he's still a young guy. I believe he's 38, definitely a native of the city of Milwaukee. He's from, I always get this wrong, but I think it's 53206, which is a notoriously poor inner city zip code neighborhood. Both he and Cavalier Johnson, who's the mayor of the city of Milwaukee, they actually went to high school together from that zip code, as is the head of their county council. So there's a new generation of leadership in that city and in that county, and he's obviously an exemplar of that.
You mentioned Mayor Johnson. How important is the relationship between Mayor Johnson and Crowley in terms of getting things done?
Yeah, it's been they're basically political twins. I mean, they're friends. They went to high school together. They've known each other. Their wives are friends.
Because sometimes when we're talking about certain issues, my voice may not be the best voice. And so, how do we make sure that we're bringing not just the trusted messenger, but the right messenger to the table? So, we've been able to work very well with everyone. And I'm extremely happy to have a partner in collaboration like Mayor Cavalier Johnson. Now, it was very unique. We have a very unique relationship. One thing that many folks may not know is that we actually went to high school together. And so I was just a year ahead of him. And Alan, he knew that he would be involved in politics. Me, not so much, but I'm glad that we've been able to work together. We've developed a relationships to where we can have these tough conversations. We're meeting constantly on a monthly basis. And sometimes we joke around how we should probably start carpooling together because we're sometimes in some of the same places all the time. But to have someone who you can actually have open, honest, and transparent conversations with, it's just been really extremely fulfilling for both the city and the county to be able to work together and tackle many of the issues facing our community, like the local option sales tax.
They've just worked hand in glove on a number of things, including, the main reason we gave David Crowley this award was convincing the state legislature to allow local governments to raise their own sales taxes. Milwaukee County has had bad budgets for this whole century. They had a huge pension scandal at the start of the 21st century, and they've been behind ever since.
We inherited, quite frankly, a mess. We've had a structural deficit within Milwaukee County, quite frankly, for the past 20 plus years. And a lot of that has stemmed from a pension scandal that happened in the early 2000s. One of my predecessors in the Milwaukee County Board, they had put forth some resolutions to try to tweak the pension. And quite frankly, they really put taxpayers in Milwaukee County in a hole. And so for almost 20 years, Milwaukee County was dealing with, how do we cut services versus improve services? I mean, we're talking about anywhere between the $20 to $40 million deficit year over year, meaning that we were having to cut some of our major programs. When we think about housing programs, about how we keep people off the streets and making sure that we wrap around services, how we, serve many of our young people as well as adults that are just as impacted in our jails and in our community reintegration center. What are we doing to make sure that we can continue to have a public transit system that can get people to work, get them to school, get them to their healthcare appointments? And so Milwaukee County was in a very tough position, just basically, and quite honestly, how are we going to just provide the basic necessities, the basic tools, the basic programs and services to the entire county to make sure they were moving forward? And that's what prompted one of my first acts to really begin working with the legislature to bring back a local option sales tax.
He and Mayor Johnson, of course, others helped lobby the legislature, and David Crowley, before he was the county executive, was in the state assembly, worked those relationships. Anyway, that their collaboration has been important on a lot of issues. They work hand in glove. And in fact, when I talked to Mayor Johnson for this story, he asked me, are there other city and county officials who are as close? And it's hard to think of too many who work as collaboratively. It's sometimes the case that city and county officials, maybe not at the very top, but department head level, even, they won't know their counterparts. Even they just operate in separate spheres. It's very siloed. We know governments are siloed, but certainly adjoining governments are often siloed as well. So having the city and county work together has been fruitful for them in a number of areas.
Does that coalition go beyond those two men to council or others in local government?
Yeah, sure. I mean, they both have, I think, pretty good relations. They both with their own councils. Crowley, he's a young black liberal legislator, but he works really well, seemingly with everybody. He's got good relations with the Chamber of Commerce and that whole crowd. He understands. I think they both understand. We had an interesting article recently by a former mayor of Indianapolis, Stephen Goldsmith, making the point that the main power a mayor has is the title and the power to convene. That, mayors in different cities, and certainly even county executives, not every county has an executive. Sometimes it's a county manager. But anyway, not to get too wonky, but sometimes their powers are limited, but they have the title that makes people think they're in charge, and therefore they are in charge, and they're able to bring together business leaders, philanthropic leaders, higher education leaders, all the different people, obviously sometimes more effectively than others. But anyway, both these particular men recognize that this is a strength, and they use it as best they can.
No need to apologize. Being wonky is what we do.
Okay.
He's got a big picture vision for Milwaukee's future. Part of that is an emphasis on racial equity. Is that translating into measurable results that others can look to?
Yeah, I believe Milwaukee County was the first jurisdiction to declare racism as a public health issue. I think some others have since, sort of back in the immediate post George Floyd reckoning period, so-called reckoning period.
When you look at all the disparities here in the state of Wisconsin and in Milwaukee, they largely fall along racial lines, whether we're talking education, transportation, employment, those social determinants of health, we see those disparities. And so without a strategic focus, without a strategic lens in place, it would be really difficult for us to make sure that when the tide rises, all the boats rise. And so when we talk about our housing program, what we've been able to do there, generational investment, seeing the largest increase in affordable housing in suburban communities in our entire history, that's to make sure that we're tackling the issues of housing, the issues of homelessness right here in our community. One of the reasons why we were recognized for 2 years in a row having one of the lowest unsheltered homeless population in the entire country of a community our size. And so without the strategic thinking, it's going to be very hard for us to tackle many of these issues in a way to where, it all fits in within the big picture and the big vision that we have within Milwaukee County. And so there's no way that, as an elected official, we know that many people can talk about the issues of the day, and we know that can change day to day. But if we're really going to tackle the issues that are affecting communities, affecting neighbors, affecting families, it's about how we're bringing strategic initiatives to the forefront to make sure that the issues of today don't continue to plague and become issues for us tomorrow.
He had the first strategic vision for the county in the last 2 or 3 decades. And, a lot of cities and counties go through these visioning exercises. But what is unusual is that then as he has other initiatives that are more concrete, whether it's on housing or mental health or what have you, he lays out how that fits within that broader vision. And he really does try to think of how these different, again, siloed program areas interact and intersect. So yeah, there's definitely some tangible benefits, and it's an endemic problem in government. Everyone is, probably especially at the leadership level, people are dealing with the crisis of the moment, and thinking long term is not an occupational hazard, as it turns out. But he has made it his business to think that way, like, what's my goal and how am I going to get there? So I think he has been effective in that way, which is another reason we wanted to highlight him.
Sure. Let's spend just a little bit of time on one of those initiatives, the housing first approach, where Milwaukee is enjoying some success. And what lessons can others that are looking on learn from the experience in Milwaukee? And do you think that approach can scale?
Yeah, so, Milwaukee County, like practically the rest of the country, has seen homelessness go up some in the last couple of years, but it remains quite low, and certainly a lot lower than a decade ago when they began this approach. I believe it was 2015. They tried this housing first model under the previous county executive, Chris Abele, who's another ally of David Crowley. It's down the number of unsheltered homeless individuals in Milwaukee County is down 92% over that decade. So obviously very substantial success in Milwaukee County, depending on the year, has either the lowest or one of the lowest per capita homeless populations in the country of any jurisdiction. So they've had a lot of success with that. So Housing First was a bipartisan idea. It was really pushed by the George W. Bush administration. It has become more partisan. It's become something that mainly Democrats still believe in and Republicans often now target. And I guess I should, just to briefly explain, the idea is in the name. First, you get people into housing, and then you deal with all their other problems, whether it's substance abuse or mental health or whatever it may be. And traditionally, most of the nation had taken a treatment first approach, where people had to get clean and sober before they were given housing, that kind of thing. So this has become really anathema among conservatives, and you can understand their logic because the places with the worst homelessness problems, such as San Francisco and Los Angeles, have done Housing First and have invested billions, really, into these programs with only growing homeless populations. So their argument is clearly it's ineffective. Others would argue that when there are adequate resources, and in places in Milwaukee, another good example of collaboration paying off, it's not just the county, but the county with the city and the nonprofit sector. There's always a ton of different nonprofits working on homelessness. You try to create an actual system. And Milwaukee County is kind of unique, where the housing division is within the Department of Health and Human Services. Anyway, they really row together, which makes the dollars go farther and the program more effective. Anyway, so places like Milwaukee and Houston have had these huge reductions in homelessness. So Housing First can work. It doesn't always work, but clearly in Milwaukee County, it has been very effective.
A guy like Crowley is always looking around corners, always looking at the big picture. In that big picture, what challenges does he face moving forward?
Well, he has certainly a lot of income disparity in that county. He has more of a city problem, but it's one of the worst traffic fatality areas, or certainly it has a major problem, maybe not one of the worst. It has one of the worst opioid addiction and disease and death rates in the country. Crowley has done some innovative things with some different models using money from opioid legal settlements, which we've actually written about separately in governing, but they still have a long way to go on that. And his budget problem is not solved. So yeah, he's certainly got plenty of work to do, and the health outcomes in Milwaukee County are not particularly great as well. And I would say, if any issue is his North Star, that would be the one. Like, if he can leave office with a overall healthier community, measured by mortality rates and disease rates and things like that, he'll be pretty proud. And again, he's trying to think, how do all these different pieces fit together to make that happen, whether it is opioids or housing or what have you.
That speaks to a really promising legacy. In your interview with him, he also talked about changing the perception of Milwaukee. How do you think that's going to work out?
Yeah, I mean, the mayor of Milwaukee, who we mentioned, Cavalier Johnson, he has this idea that Milwaukee could have a population of 1 million. I don't recall the population off the top of my head, but it is nowhere close. They both want to see Milwaukee grow. Milwaukee does have, in Milwaukee County, they do have some great assets. I mean, it's really a nice city. It's one of those cities where, I don't know if they'll appreciate my saying this, but they kind of went broke at the right time. The architecture is pretty nice. And, it's a lakefront city. And not only is that scenic and beautiful, at least in the summer, but, the need for water is a major issue in the coming decades. So they're pretty well positioned, but in those senses, on kind of lifestyle things. But yeah, they haven't had like a transformative new employer come in or new industry come in. I mean, Harley Davidson is still there. There's still some beer brewed there, and obviously, there's the usual mix of healthcare and universities. But yeah, I don't know. I think. Will Milwaukee be the next Nashville or Austin? I don't see that yet, but I guess it has the potential. I mean, I feel like I'm being a theater critic of a city in a way. I always like it when I go there. But yeah, that is, again, the kind of thing that it takes 10, 20, 30 years of collaborative leadership on the ground to make something like the explosive growth in Nashville or Austin happen. These cities that seem a little like overnight successes, there was a lot of groundwork laid. So, it's good to be thinking big and to be laying the groundwork to make it happen.
Yes, indeed. Crowley and Johnson sound like they're on their way. Alan, thank you for doing this. Appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, it's good to talk to you. Thank you.
Governing Editor Alan Greenblatt and Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley, marking the return of Public Officials of the Year. Next time out, Jared Bray joins us to profile Tulsa Mayor G.T. Bynum, another member of the POY Class of 2024.
Our editorial and production team includes Theo Douglas, Zoe Manzanetti, and Kaylee Tedrow. Paul produces the show, and our executive editor is Noelle Nell.
That will do it for us this time out. For Ashley Silver, I'm Paul Taylor. Thanks for listening. Always forward.